Some students of Somali descent will not be in the classroom today with their parents' support and blessing. Those students are holding a one-day strike protesting the Toronto District School Board's plans to implement a new program, a program that's aimed at Somali students. They say this program will single them out and marginalize them within their own schools. What exactly will this strike achieve, and why is it that this program seems to be, in the minds of some, falling flat? Ahmed Hussen is the president of the Canadian Somali Congress, one of the groups which has supported the strike, and he's on the line with us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
Why is it that students are not going to be in school today protesting the Toronto District School Board?
It's a symbolic strike by the parents and the students saying to the TDSB for one last time, please listen to our concerns. Don't implement a plan that will stigmatize us and marginalize us, a plan that was never owned by this community, and a plan that, if implemented, will actually make things worse for this community.
Briefly, if you can, just remind us what it is that the parents and the students are concerned about with this plan. We'll walk through what the plan is supposed to do in a moment, but what are some of the concerns that people have?
Well, first of all, the TDSB has always been saying that this plan has come from the community. That is completely false. The chair of the Task Force on Somali Success is Chris Bolton. He's the chair of the TDSB. And the co-chairs have been John Hastings and Maria Rodriguez and others. So this has been a TDSB-led process with a cover of the Somali community, but essentially the decisions have been made by TDSB. The meetings and the agenda and the timelines have been set by TDSB, and the product reflects that. The product reflects the inadequate consultation that TDSB has had with the community, and it shows, the recommendations show how far off TDSB is in terms of really reflecting the community's wishes with respect to education.
Now, this is a plan that was created in part to address the high dropout rate among Somali students.
Okay.
Something that you and I have talked about many times in past, the disengagement that some people feel within your community, and how the board hoped to try and address that. Where do you think it falls flat, aside from who is helping to put this together?
Well, in the name of helping a community or helping an individual, you can actually do a lot of damage if you don't do it properly. And that's the crux of the debate. In essence, the debate is between the community that is saying, yes, we have an issue, but you have to address that issue comprehensively with other students and not isolate and stigmatize and marginalize these students. Whereas there's TDSB who are still referring to students who were born in Etobicoke hospitals as Somalis in 2014. That's the crux of the matter, and I think it really shows you what happens when people are still addressed in a manner that marginalizes them. Instead of dealing with this issue comprehensively in our schools, TDSB schools are failing generally. They scored 5.5 out of 10 in the recent Fraser Institute report. Out of all the GTA school boards, the TDSB schools are the worst performing. So it's not just that our children are failing, but I think the schools are failing. And TDSB should be humble enough to come down to the level of the parents and reach a comprehensive solution to these issues, instead of telling us what the problem is and then telling us what the solution is and expecting us to just accept whatever comes from on high.
Now, the board has said that it did consult with the community. It says that task force members are of Somali descent, that the community was involved in this, and this is not about stigmatizing anybody. It's about trying to reach out to a community and work with a community. What do you make of that argument?
The recommendations reflect the fact that that's not true. If you look at just one single recommendation, the second one, number 2, it talks about how Canadian Somali students are not really good with traditional forms of learning, and that the TDSB will explore non-traditional forms of learning, including hands-on learning, such as woodworking and mechanics and so on. That really tells us that the TDSB doesn't think that our kids can perform and have the potential to go to higher levels of education. The second one, another example, is that a few years ago the community wanted to set up a scholarship within schools in Etobicoke that have a large percentage of Canadians of Somali background, and they wanted to set up a scholarship specific for them. TDSB said, that's against our policy, we can't do that. Guess what? In the recommendations, there is a proposal to set up a scholarship specific for Canadian Somali students. So was the community wrong then, or is TDSB wrong now? It's discriminatory. You can't do those kinds of things.
Is there a middle ground here?
Absolutely. If the TDSB comes back to the community, engages them fully, addresses the concerns we have about some of the recommendations, I think that we can then work together to find a common solution to this. But the solution will not be arrived at by further stigmatizing and marginalizing these children, and that's why they're protesting.
If you step back from this just for a moment and look at the whole picture, for people who are listening to this across the city who don't have roots in this struggle, what do you think the value is in getting this right?
In essence, Matt, the problem is the identification of people. I think most Canadians would agree that if kids are struggling, that the struggles of these kids should be addressed within the school system. One of the concerns we have with these recommendations is that there's a lot of outsourcing that's suggested, that instead of dealing with the issues in the schools and build up these failing schools, TDSB is recommending a lot of outsourcing of the work that should be done to the students. So I think this would offend a lot of Canadians because, the stigmatization, the marginalization, but also the shirking of responsibility by TDSB away from the school system and towards more outsourcing and moving the responsibility and outcomes and measurements away from TDSB to private organizations.
And if the board says we're implementing these recommendations, just very briefly, what do you do then?
Well, they would be hard pressed to find parents who would surrender their kids for implementation to a program that would further marginalize them. A lot of the community members are educated now about the recommendations. They know these recommendations in and out. And so, TDSB can accept these recommendations theoretically, but they would be hard-pressed to find any parents who would allow their children to be put through these programs.
Ahmed Hussen, we'll leave it there. Thank you. It's good to talk to you.
You're most welcome.